Hey guys! Hopefully you can hear me this time. We are in a different location. If you can tell, we are in my very own classroom. I got the okay. I have a little sunburn as well. And so I'm so excited that you guys could come into my space for this final review. And if you're in my own class, you guys miss this. This was our space. It's kind of like cribs, but not at all. So if I were to turn around here, I'm going to kind of go this way a little bit and use my board just a little bit. We'll see what that looks like. But I'm excited that you guys are here for the final review that we are going to do. And so I posted a video this morning. And on that video, we talked about how if you were to do one thing today, I would go through the videos once more, 1 through 6. And then from there, what I would do is I would try these practice DBQs just for a speed test. You don't have to write the whole thing, just to go through them to prepare of kind of, that experience of I'm on a time crunch and what do we need to do? So we have a few things we're going to do through in this final test review live. So thanks for joining and tuning in one more time and coming to see a little bit of my space. The sunburn is this side. Everything's opposite here. So it's a little sunnier in Wisconsin, as you can tell. And we are just really excited that the test is tomorrow. Just make sure you guys know that. A quick little tip of something that I would maybe do is I would, on your phones, right now, because it's after test time, I would set an alarm for tomorrow. You could do multiples, but I would set one already for 1:45. If you want to do it a little earlier, you could. But at 1:45 should be when you stop writing and start to submit by that 50-minute mark. And so if you set an alarm now, if you weren't paying attention to your screen, you still would be able to get that uploaded in time. And so that would be really good. Okay, so set an alarm on your phone right now, and even if you kind of make sure everything is turned off when you go into the test, your alarm should still work, so that's good. You might want to test that out. You can also set other alarms if you want to, hey, at 12:15 Central Time, so whatever that means for you, to set an alarm hey, I need to get set up so that 30 minutes prior to the test I can get in. Something to know, as we've heard from other people that have taken the test already, is that there has been people that struggled to get in initially, just in that 30-minute time slot. So just so that you're familiar, and if you have that moment where it's not letting you get in, so you have your e-ticket, make sure you found your e-ticket, okay? Talk to your teacher if you can't find your e-ticket. You can go through My AP as well if you didn't get the email. That's kind of like AP Classroom and the settings. You should be able to find it. But when you do that, you should be able to get in to take your test. And if you can't initially get on in that 30-minute window, that's why they're giving you so much time, is if you can't get in the initial 30 minutes, you'll get there before the test starts. So if it's 22 and you're not in yet, don't freak out. That's when you can refresh the screen. But after 1 o'clock, do not refresh your screen. Okay, so those are just a few quick things as we start off. We are going to go through a few things together. First of all, you'll see, mirrors. This way, there it is. I made this more so because I was in a conversation with a student this morning, and we had done this a little bit during the year for semester review. And I will put this in the comments after the video, so you can have a link to this. It's just an infographic that I'm not going to lie, I made very quickly today. But what it does is, you guys can see this, and if I went to my board as well, it's going through the time periods. So this is 1200 to 1450, and these are the empires that exist during this time. If I were going to 1450 to 1750, here are our empires. The big 5 states, as we had talked about before, as well as kind of the land empires, Ottoman, Safavid, Mughal, Russia, Ming, Qing, etc. So all those are listed here, more so just so you guys have a quick reference guide, because when you see the prompt times, sometimes it just, even with the practice ones we just did, I did the same ones with you guys today, because they weren't mine, and so I just used them, and I hadn't read them before I shared them out to my students and to you guys. So I did the same thing, sat down for the time and did them myself. And so one thing that I caught, and we'll go into this in a minute, 1450 to 1750, I was like, I know that's land empires. And then I just started thinking, like, who specifically was there? And so I felt like this would be helpful. And then I added, kind of again, this last one then here of who's around 1750 to 1900. And then I was trying to give you a visual, right? In the last period, we have Industrial Revolution, which we know always connects to imperialism. And when you have imperialism, it's because they need resources for, again, the Industrial Revolution, right? So that's the connection that I put on there. And then I struggled with icons. This is a picture of the Americas because the big thing in this time period is that was interconnected, right? And so that's a big deal. And then, again, then I got totally stuck on a cool image for the first one. It's like, oh, here's our first empires. I don't know, we start the course in 1200, and that's all I got for you. So that's just some of the things. I will put that before, okay? Just so that you guys have the access to that, because that might be helpful for you when you're kind of setting up all the tabs that you might have open for the test tomorrow. Highly recommend, again, 2 different windows, right? Test on one side, and again, what you're writing on. I highly recommend, if you can, to use a Google Doc, just because it saves everything. If you accidentally deleted, you can go into revision history. That's under File or where it says Last Saved At. If you click that on a Google Doc, like I'll show you, like if we were on this Google Doc right here on the screen on the left, except that I'm zoomed in. So, but there is always under File, you have the option to go into the revision history. I haven't gone this way. The version history right here. And so you can go in and then you can see CU version history. If you accidentally deleted things or something crazy happened, you can get into it, which is really great. Okay, so just so you guys know where that is. Okay, I'll get the timeline up in the comments below once we're done here. So just make sure you kind of refer back to that. So, all right, so those are some just housekeeping things. It's exciting that you're here with me once again. I want to quickly note who won, right? So we did this competition for weeks and it was super fun. More so because of the reality of that I couldn't be in this room and either were my students. And so normally we do this on Sunday nights at school. We have the AP Review Olympics and we couldn't do that this year. So we transitioned to online and invited you all in for the first time ever. So here is what we're going to talk about. First of all is just who won. Okay, so I'm going to switch tabs up here. Now I will, one little disclaimer here. Some of you guys, I sent out an email to our top 3 teams, and of those top 3 teams, not going to say which place is which, only a few people actually sent me pictures that I said like, hey, I'll put you on the slide. And then I just ran out of time to try to figure that out and re-email. So you'll see in a second that one team was really good at sending in pictures, even though it's not everybody, and 2 other teams were questionable at best. So here we go for how this is. I'm going to turn the screen real quick. You can't see. There, see, look at my room. Going full screen up here. All right. We're back. Okay. So who won this baby, right? Let's talk through who won and where we're going from there. So first of all, as we are looking at the winners of the Olympic Challenge, if we are going to, and drum roll it up, 3rd place as we go on in, goes to this lovely team here, as we're kind of trying to get them on the screen now. There we go. Some people on team 281 from Westside High School, which is kind of a fun name here, in Texas with Mrs. Johnson as the teacher. Okay, so congratulations to all of these guys and the other pictures that don't exist here. Nice job to you guys. 3rd place is where you ended up. I'll show the scoreboard at the end. 2nd place then, after last week's challenge, we're going to go to my own class with clearly more than 2 people, okay, who didn't send in pictures. They're probably just annoyed with how much that I'm contacting them lately, but so 2nd place is one of my teams from my class, which means our winners that sent in no pictures is our teams from the Carolinas. So good job, North and South Carolina, with the teachers, Maynard, Baker, I don't know how to say this, Mangan, Davis, Whitaker, and Bowler. A true team from many different places, many different schools. And so congratulations, you guys won the challenge this year. If you still want to send a picture in, I can get that. So for memory's sake, you guys are in history as the first ever team that has won. So nice job to you guys. Here is the leaderboard at the end of the day. I will throw that up on the screen for you guys as well to see as we are looking through this. So 864 winning team, 913, 281. Fourth place, just missing it, is going to be team 333 and 282. Almost there. Almost there, but not. So, thanks for joining us for the Olympic review. If you haven't been part of that, that's okay. But we just wanted to kind of shout out to our winning teams of who you guys were, and then go from there. So, just looking at some of your comments that we're talking about here, what if you close out the test? That's not good, okay? So don't close it off. One of the things, again, you could try, if you guys don't know this, I think it's Control on a Chromebook, Control-Shift-T reopens any tabs that you close, but you really don't want that to happen. There is at least one other quick thing that I would note that's good, and that is the fact that there is now a backup if you cannot submit. You have to try to submit by the time, and then they'll give you a screen and a special email if it doesn't go through. So that's good. Last week, people that took the test didn't have that option, which is a big deal and really sucks. So there are tons of people, I know people from our school that could not submit when they were done. A lot of the times, though, it came back to using their phone, and they were on like chem or bio or other tests like that they could not submit because of iPhone issues. So if you were going to handwrite it, make sure that you check the requirements, change it so your pictures are JPEGs instead of HEIC files on your iPhone, etc. Okay? So let's get into the final review of things that I want to talk about, and which is kind of our skills practice, right, as we're going through this, okay? So that's the big thing that we're going to look at, and then we are going to kind of close off and get you guys back to reviewing, back to doing things on your own as we are going through this. So good job to those teams. Good job to everybody. I mean, the goal really, winning is fun, but the goal was so that you guys could review. So I hope that you've had a good time to review. The units 1 through 6 videos still are going to be available, obviously, and I think you should watch those at like 1.5 speed. That's what I said this morning. Kind of refresh your mind, make a timeline, look at this infographic, and then you guys should be set. So can I submit on the Chromebook and be able to see the documents at the same time? You're going to have to do kind of a 2-window split, kind of like what I'm doing right here, right? So create 2 windows. Okay, and then you can have one side be the test, and then one side would be your documents. So kind of move your screens away and practice that. They once said it was okay to have 2 devices open on the test, but it sounds like that causes issues. So we're going to go with the 2-window option instead of doing this, okay? I think review all day long is what I say, with some nice little breaks in between. So let's talk about the 2 speed tests that we did, just to give you guys a little bit of feedback. So the first option, I'm going to switch over here so you guys can see this first DBQ that we looked at, if you did. So here's the organizer. I'll throw this again in the comments. One thing, just as I saw you guys talking about the split screen option, I have an extension that does that, but then they're trying to tell you that turn off all your extensions, which you can do in the settings of Chrome, just to turn them off temporarily and then turn them back on. Grammarly for sure is a big deal, but just so you guys know, you might want to just manually make 2 windows, okay? I will also throw this in the comments below, and then as we go, that's the organizer that I have. Now, I personally, and I know that I have access to a printer right now, so I had printouts of this at my house that I created before we kind of went down on this lockdown situation. And so I've been doing this on paper. You could do this also on paper and just kind of draw it out personally if you don't have access and you want to do that on paper, or you could just do that on the computer, okay? So that's kind of where we are at with this. So this was the first practice one. And if you didn't do it, it's cool. Just stay along for the ride. And as we're looking at this prompt, okay, in the comments, throw it out to me here. When you're looking at this prompt, okay, what is the key thing of the skill we are looking at? Like, what kind of way should you frame your argument for this first practice one as you are looking at it, okay? Evaluate the extent of change in patterns of trade from 1200 to 1750. What is our skill, our theme, our historical thinking skill that you guys said could go there, okay? What do you guys think? Throw it in the comments. What kind of skill do we have? Anybody? Change. You win because everyone's a little slow. Change and continuity. I think the one thing that I want to like really focus on as we're looking at this one is that everybody thinks when we are looking, I'm going to switch this over here. When we are looking at change, you see that, and that's all you think of. Every one of these skills has like an opposite if you think of it that way. So in this one, when you guys are looking at it, it says change, but it also is continuity, okay? And so when it says evaluate the extent, and we've talked about this before, evaluate the extent is basically a spectrum. And so it's how much did basically it change over these periods of time, okay? And so when you're looking at this, it's so fun to have my board back temporarily. Okay, I don't know what you guys have at your schools. These are new in our building this year. I just hit the save button. But when you're looking here, change is the key word, okay? What changed or what stayed the same? I could use the pen, but or what stayed the same, okay? So when you are looking at this, your answers can be changes. What did it go from and what did it go to? But it also could say it didn't change, and one of your arguments could say this is what stayed the same. I've seen through many things from my own students that a lot of times what we're doing is we're just looking at one way, right? Because it says change, so I only talk about changes. Kind of the Portuguese DBQ, if you guys did that one, I feel like that was a good one that you could have easily done a continuity because it changed to some extent, but very few people did a continuity. And so with this one, I would, if you guys did this in advance, ask the question, did I find a continuity? You don't have to, but it gives you the option when it says evaluate the extent, like how much did it change? Well, it could change and it could stay the same, okay? So then you kind of went through these documents. Oops, so rusty from not being in my room. Okay, so then you went through the documents that are in here, and it kind of shaped this different way, okay? So what I'd love for you guys to do in the chat, just so I can see what you guys did, as you went through the documents, what are some of the claims that you guys made with this DBQ, the patterns of trade DBQ? What are some of the arguments that you could make with this one, okay? So throw that in the chat as we are looking here, and we'll talk about this one. Is my internet not working as well as it should? Because I didn't really think through that when I switched locations. I just had to be back here at 4 for something else at school. So, so just so you guys see here, anybody, what claims did you guys throw in here? What are some of the claims for patterns of trade? Okay. When I was doing this, okay, everyone's talking about MacBooks in the comments, but when I did this DBQ, I will tell you what I wrote, and these are not the only things that you can write for this patterns of trade DBQ. I thought this one actually was really easy, but that's just me. I don't have a teacher. Okay, so one of the things that we are talking about with the patterns of trade, I said that one of the major changes, right, is the idea of the emergence of the Atlantic Ocean in the trading networks, right? And so you could, as some of you guys said, the idea of like trade intensifying and talking about the safety of the Silk Road, the idea of increase in luxury goods. I actually put the opposite of that as a continuity, and I basically said that there was a continued desire for Asian goods, and then I could have used the document in that way. I see some of you guys are bringing up slavery was adopted by Europeans, and so that is a change. Now remember when we talked about patterns of change in regards to trade, we could say that that was slavery itself as people who were enslaved could have been the change itself. I personally, when I first did this, because I kind of threw in another one at the end, my first change was the emergence of the Atlantic Ocean Trading Network. And then I'm going to read a little bit of my thesis here for what I wrote, right? I wrote a little bit about the idea of, let me find it on here, that the Atlantic or triangular trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas emerged and was marked by coerced labor systems. That's super fancy, I know. But basically, it's the idea of slavery being emerged, and that kind of focused on that way, okay? So that's some of that. So the claims. If I were to read my thesis of what I wrote this, okay? It's fancy, and I know I have a master's degree, so yours may not look like this, but maybe. Okay? While an insatiable desire for Asian goods continued, okay, there's my continuity, through 1200 and 1900, first by land and then by sea, comma, the most significant change for me, like remember I'm making an argument, this is the bigger deal. The most significant change was the emergence of triangular trade in the Atlantic Ocean between Africa, Europe, and the Americas, marked by coerced labor systems. In that case, I had two claims, right? Two claims that I would be going into in there. Now, I realized after I did this, I added a third claim just kind of after I did that, and you could easily also talk about the shift from land-based routes, so this is a change, land-based routes to more water-based routes. Because when you look at the years here, 1200 to 1750, we know that 1450 is, again, kind of that period, more like 1492, where we're marking the age of where we're getting into the Americas. But also we still see this idea in the Indian Ocean had been going prior to that. And so easily could talk about the idea of people trying to get into the Indian Ocean more by water or maritime routes compared to the land-based routes that we talked about before, okay? So those are some of the things. As I'm looking at you guys in here, some of you guys have some fantastic things that you guys wrote. And so things that I would be familiar about while you're looking here, a lot of these things would totally count. You just want to be specific. You guys notice that, and I think this is the biggest thing, that people are kind of falling into this trap of being too vague in their thesis statements. This is true for my own students. Sorry, guys, calling you out. But what we're seeing is you guys just kind of say there's a change in the Americas, or there's a change and it's more globalized, or it's a change in the existing trade routes. But you need to actually, in your thesis statement, like add some details. Add some like good stuff in there. So when I said something about like there was an insatiable desire for Asian trade goods continued, and that there was a change in the emergence of this new trading system, I sometimes wonder if you would get the point what if I would have stopped at with the emergence of the Atlantic trading system, period, without adding the idea of coerced labor systems, without adding the whole thing about that. So try to be as specific as you can. And one of the benefits you have is this year is that you're typing. So after you write it, you can kind of, if you look at the time, you want to circle back and make your thesis more specific. I think that would be a great idea, okay? Let's switch gears a little bit. So that was my thesis. Before your thesis, right, you want to add contextualization. And I feel as though, and to be totally honest, in my, moving this again, my How to DBQ video, I talked about maybe doing this at the end because some of you guys spend way too much time on it. But then I realized that people weren't going in depth enough in my own class, and I feel like it could be an easy statement, okay? So all of these are really great things. I've seen you guys put some really good things in here, water-based routes, land-based routes, but again, try to be as specific as you can, and if it's not there in the beginning, you could totally add that at the end, okay? So what would you write, though, for context? Context for the patterns of trade DBQ, the practice one here. What could you guys write about in this one? Knowing that this is a very large time period, 1200 to 1750. Part of me is curious if they'll give you a large time period because of it kind of can cover a lot of our content because we only have one DBQ, which is totally not normal, but maybe they will, okay? So this one's a little bit longer in that it's 2 periods. And if I were to switch gears again, right, and looked back at this guy, the time period for the patterns of trade is looking at the years 1200, right, in this big area here, all the way down to 1750 here. So all these different states. Again, I'll link this at the end for you guys. Okay, so when we're looking at that, what are some of the things you could write in your context for patterns of trade? The trickiest thing about this, right, is the idea that you don't want to steal things in your context that you might want to use as evidence beyond the documents, or outside evidence as we call it, okay? So just so that you're familiar, like, try to think of things that you're not going to steal. And so for me, when I planned this today, I actually worked a little bit differently in that I made my arguments, right? And I totally added that one later about like shift from land-based routes to water-based routes. So you could have done that, something like that. But then I added my outside evidence because I kind of felt like I had a lot. Normally when I do a DBQ, I feel like outside evidence makes me kind of like stop and think, but I'm like, there were so many things that weren't in those documents about trade that I could add in. And so like I was writing a ton of them, but I don't want to double dip, because if it's in my context and in my outside evidence, you're only going to get the points one place. And so I wouldn't want to like kind of shoot myself in the foot because I put it in my context and then it's going to be my outside evidence. So let's see what you guys are writing here. You guys talked about Columbian exchange a little bit, diseases a little bit, okay? Mongols. Industrial Revolution is going to be after this, okay? But that's okay. You can do context about what comes after. I think it's harder to do that when you're setting up the stage of like, how did we get here? So, good question. What would be ideals for context be? What could you write about? And so I think a lot of these are good that you guys are mentioning as I'm kind of scrolling through the comments here. But I would say things that I would write about, and some of you guys have mentioned here, kind of the existence of those trade networks that already were there, right? Talking about the land routes of Trans-Sahara trade and Silk Road trade. And then I would kind of link in the idea that the emergence of exploration in maritime routes would make sense in your context as well. But remember, you don't want to just say that exploration began. Like, you want to add some specifics, so who, what, where, why, when kind of situation. And so if you threw in evidence that you're not going to use in your essay, like you could mention the idea of da Gama or Diaz and the idea of trying to get to the Indian Ocean, right? You could talk about Columbus. You just don't want to talk about things that you're going to steal later in your essay, okay? So just kind of be familiar with those ideas, set the stage of how, kind of what's happening, right? And that will help you set your context, but you want to add specific evidence in your context for this one. So technologies would be really great. That would set the stage really solidly as well, okay? So as you go through there, the way that I grouped them, and everyone can group them differently, you guys can throw the numbers in the chat if you would like. I threw together for the emergence of the Atlantic Ocean slavery kind of together 2, 4, and 5 for the documents. And then desire for Asian goods, I put 1 and 3. If you did different groupings, which is totally fine, I don't have the only right answers, you might have different groups there. So outside evidence then of what I had to do, this is the big idea for evidence beyond the documents or outside evidence. It needs to support your argument. So some of the things that you could easily put here, and this is where this one is really easy to double dip and you don't want to do that. I threw some things in here about Columbus, right? That would totally make sense with the emergence of the Atlantic Ocean trading system, and I could just use Columbus and the Columbian exchange instead of in my context, use it as my outside evidence to prove the emergence of Atlantic slave trade and how that then led to slavery, which I could easily also put together in there, the idea of the labor systems that existed in the Americas, right? We could talk about the idea of the encomienda, that's specific evidence as well. You just don't want to say they had coerced labor, they had forced labor. You want to use specific things for that in there, okay? Also, if we were desiring, like Asian goods was another one of mine, you could easily list specific Asian goods beyond silk. Silk was in the document, so you couldn't double dip and grab that. You could also talk about, like if you were talking more land-based routes, you could talk about, I saw you guys threw that in the chat, like Pax Mongolica and how it was safer during the Mongol time. That would be outside evidence. You could talk about how they were taxed, right, by the Ottoman and the Safavid empires, and that's why people were kind of driven to more sea-based routes. That would work as well, okay? So all those things, really good things you guys are throwing in the chat that we were seeing, but that's super solid. The idea of rice, for sure, champa rice, fast-growing rice, those types of ideas of things that are spreading would totally work, okay, as outside evidence. But don't just throw it in there. You need to show how that outside evidence proves your argument. And I think that's where most people miss it. Instead of just saying like Columbus happened, and that's your outside evidence, you have to prove that it was a change in this emergence of the Atlantic Ocean trading network because Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right, and found the Americas and landed in the Caribbean, etc. And then more explorers came, which then brought this whole thing together, right? Or if you guys were talking about the Mongols or about the Ottomans and the Safavid on here, you want to show how people desired these goods and how they wanted to get there and how these ideas prove your point. When you first look at it, you're like, well, the Safavids, I don't know if that really links really good for my desire for Asian goods, right? And so if that happens, right, you kind of want to think through, like, how do I make sure my outside evidence proves this? And I love these like sentence stems, and I think they're really solid. Things like this demonstrates, this shows, this proves that, and circle right back to your topic sentence, okay? So that's kind of where we're at. So again, good job on those ideas that we have here. This was just a planning to see if you guys are, how you're doing within the time. For me, this one, I got this baby done in 10 minutes. Not the second one. So we're going to go through the second one in just a second. So let me just kind of see if you have any other questions about the first one as you're looking through there. Oh, I didn't talk about one other thing. One other thing is doing a happy document analysis, right? So you have your thesis and context. I think they can go together, as someone asked in your opening paragraph. I like context first, a linking sentence that shows how your context is relevant to your thesis statement, because you have to make sure your contextualization actually is relevant to the prompt. And if you have a linking sentence, then you kind of do that. So context, thesis, then your body paragraphs with your arguments. For me, I would have two because I have two major arguments, right? And so topic sentence, use the documents to prove what I'm saying, using sentences like this shows, this exists, yada, yada, okay? And then I would always, whenever I use a document, I would on this one, I don't know what numbers you guys would want, but I for sure wanted to do document analysis, what we call happy, some of you guys call it hip the documents, whatever. I would do documents 1 and 2 is what I picked. If I had to, I would do 4 or 3 instead, but 1 and 2 were my two favorite to go through, okay? And when I was looking at those, I think what I would do if I was looking at the documents, and I know they're on the screen over here, document 1, I think you could do really well about point of view and talk about how our author of document 1 was a traveler, so he has firsthand experience. And I like to kind of like put two of them together a lot of times because I feel like it makes your happy better, right? And so when this one was looking at the idea of European travelers is who the audience is, I love it, and I have some students that do this fantastic. But they link a specific phrase in the document to what is being said. So if I was I'm going to switch and look at the documents that you guys see right here. In document 1, and this will highlight on your screen, this phrase right here, the road you travel, right, talking about these cities, is perfectly safe, right, whether it's day or night. And again, his audience is for European merchants. And if I wanted to make sure that my happy document analysis ties to my argument, I could say that this other traveler and his point of view is to convince these other European merchants that it's perfectly safe, and so even if that wasn't true, they desired these Chinese goods so much, he's trying to get more people to go so that over these routes, land-based routes at this time, right, it's 1340, that they will go, right? Does you see how, like, now I'm analyzing really the point of view of the author and the audience of where it is, and tying it with the document and my argument. I'm pulling out, and this is where you could quote really easily, is, quote, perfectly safe, which shows they really had a strong desire for Chinese goods and was trying to convince these merchants to go to get the goods, okay? So you see how I'm doing happy document analysis to not only analyze parts of historical context, audience, point of view, or purpose, but then I'm kind of tying them together to your argument that you're making. That's like strong document analysis, okay? So I would do that one. And then I probably would do document 2. Again, this one is the king of Congo, right? And they're really calling out the idea that Europeans are coming in because people have such a voracious appetite for these goods, and they're literally stealing people from the Congo. And so they're calling them out. And so if you did point of view that this is from a king to a king, you can do the audience. I really like those two together. And you can even throw purpose. The purpose is that they would literally stop kidnapping their people, right? But again, tie that back to the argument is that there's this desire for these new markets, right? That there's an emergence of the slave trade, and this proves the fact that people really cared more about money than they did about people, which led to this, okay? So you want to do that at least for 2 documents. A lot of you are asking about complexity, and I feel like I'm like all other teachers. I say drop the complexity, don't even waste your time, and create a buffer and analyze 3 documents, or put in 3 outside evidences if you have time. You're more apt to get the points that way to kind of create that buffer than if you're going to do it another way. Okay, so that's what my recommendations are as you guys are looking at this document and how we did. So hopefully that's helpful. If you want to have any specific ones, other questions, you can throw it in the chat as we're looking at that. But in a second, we're going to go to the second one. And now this one's the one that if I were to kind of call the shot, Babe Ruth moment, I'm calling this as like one of the DBQ topics on the test tomorrow. I have no evidence of that. It's just my gut feeling of the topic. We'll see if I'm right. I've never been right, but who knows, okay? All right, so I'm going to check out the chat real quick, see what you guys said here. Trade patterns just really means the idea of like what kind of trade are people engaged in. So if words ever trick you up, the nice thing of this being open notes is you could easily look up any of these things, right? On this next one, I looked up a word because I just wanted a synonym. And so I quick did that. I was like, I don't want to keep using the word similar. So yeah, barely any people get the complexity points. That's why I say don't go for it. You're questioning how you would analyze document 3. If you're still talking about looking at document 3, I would do context for document 3 on the last one. I have to look back at the documents for that one, but I wrote historical context for that one and talking about how people ended in that area. Again, you could do it. Again, 1 and 2 were my favorite, and then I would maybe buffer with a different one as well. So let's go to the next one, okay? There's a lot of things I did not mention that could count for complexity. Yes, obviously. Contextualization, outside evidence, other ways you could source the documents. I'm just giving you my opinion and looking at kind of what you guys are saying in here. So let's go on to the next one. This is the idea, if you guys are looking at this and it's on your screen right now, is this, right? Evaluate the extent to which rulers were comparable. That should be the word that like you see and you note that because that's the key word for historical thinking skills. Were comparable in the variety of methods used to legitimize and consolidate their power. Okay, so that was the prompt for this one. So our thinking skill here is, sorry, Catherine, I'm just coming back to your question. Every time like I start going on to the next thing, I see something in the chat and want to circle back. But I say don't even try complexity. Spend your time creating a buffer to make sure that if you mixed up a document and you thought for sure this is what it meant and it didn't and you got it wrong, that you now have done 3 document analysis so you get the point for 2 because you did something wrong. So the buffer is creating like that's why I say use all the documents because you have to use 4 to get all those points for evidence. So use 5 in case you totally misinterpreted 1, right? And secondly, same thing, I would do that for happy document analysis. So just pretend complexity doesn't exist is my opinion. Okay, so we're on the next one, right? So here are the things. Now, someone in the chat already said this, and it's not in the document. Jason, nice job. Religion, massive monuments. In my classroom, like literally all year, we said, what do people do to legitimize rule? They build big stuff. We've said it all year. And guess what? It's not in the documents. So you could have a claim that was just about that. And all your outside evidence doesn't exist there. And then you're good to go, okay? So those are some of the things that we want to talk about. Error. We're having an error. Buffering. Are you guys with me? It's thinking. We are lagging here too. That's what I'm trying to type, but it's lagging, so I can't. We're trying, guys. We are trying. Greetings. I don't know how to make it go faster. I just know that we're lagging, and I have a little error on my screen. So that's solid and really helpful for you guys. So we're waiting for it to refresh so I can see that we're back. So just take a breath, stand up, take a stretch break. I don't even know if you can see me. I'm going to go in my own chat on my phone. Hello, I can't even tell if I'm broadcasting at this point. Hello, good day. So this is an example of maybe why I should stick with streaming at home, my friends. So, we're a delay of game. I can't even see the chat because it's still thinking. I could be here the whole time, and I don't realize that you guys could see me. Are we back? Hello? So, that was fun while we're still here. I got nothing on my screen right now. It's getting a red bar. It's fun. So these are technical issues. It happens to the best of them. You would think that the school Wi-Fi would be better than my home Wi-Fi, because it usually is. From there, I still can't see the screen. Oh gosh, the page is unresponsive. Oh dear. What does one do here? Hey, let's go this way.